We are, again, taking a look at Derry, Pennsylvania. And we have here a good old view by T.M. Fowler. He did this one about 1900. You see, the very heart of Derry has to do with the railroad. This was the classification yard where they put trains together, the railroad station. This was the roundhouse where they kept the engines in repair and kept them supplied with what they needed. And the overhead bridge. A lot of these things are gone now, but they were part of the scene in Derry when the railroad was the big issue. This is a map from around the same time. This is Derry, New Derry up here, and then you see the main line of the railroad coming over to Latrobe. And it pretty much follows Saxman Run. Saxman Run was named for the Saxman family. They had settled around there before Latrobe even existed. This was where they settled, right around here. The original Saxman had about 400 acres, a lot of territory around here. His great-grandson, Matthias Saxman, was a person who did some of the, was responsible for some of the industrial development after the railroad started to eclipse, because the railroad was the major economic factor in Derry in the early years. But when the shops that were at Derry were moved to Pittsburgh, things were not the same, and other industries began to become important. And Matthias Saxman was one of the guys who was a promoter of local industry back then. This is Matthias Saxton, to give you a sense of time. In the year 1906, he was 70. This is the town of Peanut, just to the west of Derry. This was one of the creations of Saxman Coal Company. There was a shaft there. They were digging coal, and it was a place that people from Derry could get a job. Another place that Saxman was invested in was the American Window Glass's Derry Sand Works. And that was a place where they were making, processing sand so that it could be used in the production of glass. I'll show you how that fit in. Way back here, that was the plant where they were processing sand. It would be sent into Pittsburgh and used as the basic material for making glass. And they were getting sand up in Chestnut Ridge here. We'll see this field here is empty now, but it will eventually become filled. Here we are. This is that field that was empty in 1900, and this is where Westinghouse set up their business. Westinghouse became another very important economic factor in the town. This over here shows the roundhouse, and we'll see a little bit more of that. This is mapping of the roundhouse, 1928. This was a place you could pull these engines into all these different bays and have them serviced. I have a picture of that. This is the roundhouse. This is the main feature of a roundhouse. It's the turntable. A train can pull onto here, and then that can move, which can switch that engine into any of those bays where it can be serviced, worked on, repaired if necessary, lubricated, have all the things that have to be done to keep the thing going. Steam engines were labor intensive. They took a lot of work to keep them going. This was another major feature out in Derry, the overhead bridge. Why this became a big deal was because you had a lot of tracks going through down in here. You had maybe about around 12 tracks going through there at one point. And you had to get across there sometimes, and this made it a lot simpler to get across the railroad tracks. This was close to the railroad station, and it was built in 1893. This shows the location. This is that overhead bridge in mapping. And right over here is the railroad station. This is coming down, and as it comes across on the this side of the tracks, it's known as South Chestnut. And I think we have a picture of that. This is what it looked like in the older days. Kind of a nice scene out of maybe something like a Norman Rockwell painting. But this is a doctored up photograph. This is 1939. It gives you a picture of Derry from up in the air. And we see some things that, here's a big dam, Lake Ethel, water supply. It was built by the Stark Construction from Greensburg around 1900. And when you move over here, right here, this was the Westinghouse plant. This became a big issue in in the teens, but it didn't have the name Westinghouse yet. It was one of their subsidiaries. In 1927, it took on the name of Westinghouse, and they were producing insulators there. The big insulators. I don't mean the kind that guys go out and pick up in the field. I mean the really big ones that were used for conveying large voltages on the big high steel. You get a look at Westinghouse, proximity to the roundhouse. This is the overhead bridge up here. And I want to go ahead here a minute. This is the Westinghouse plant. This is 1977. In 77, the railroad was not using steam power. But this just happened to be a specialty train that was coming through town. This is looking down over here. This was the old Westinghouse plant. These two buildings were here before the Westinghouse plant. They were associated with the streetcar. This was the powerhouse and machine shop for the streetcar. This was the streetcar barn up here. Now, those things you think that are going to be forever, like Westinghouse, that's what's there now. You know, it's not there anymore. It's gone. 1994 was the last year that any information was sent about its corporate existence, and it was no longer Westinghouse, and it was Industrial Ceramics. This building over here, which I can show you, remained after Westinghouse was wiped out. This was the, originally it was the car barn for the streetcar operation. It's where the streetcars went at nighttime. This is a good shot showing the tracks. This is looking east with Chestnut Ridge going up this way. This was the powerhouse of the streetcar operation. Down here further is the car barn. And some of these here are the buildings that were accessories of the Westinghouse operation. This is the streetcar operation, how it came out of Derry. It started out of Derry, down through all these old mining towns, and went down to the Hecla Junction, where it connected with the line coming down from Greensburg. This mapping from about 1917 in red shows what was important there was the roads for automobiles. The black lines were railroads. You see it coming down to Derry, Bradenville going on to Latrobe. What you also see are these small black lines. The small black lines were that was the trolley line, originating in Derry and going south more or less. This is looking up again east, probably from the overhead bridge, and you see one of the hotels in Derry. Hotels were very important because there was a lot of traffic, people coming and going. Sometimes the train crews needed a place to stay. This was the Windsor Hotel, and we can get that a bit more specifically. Let us see if we can focus in on that. That was the Windsor Hotel right there. The overhead bridge, the roundhouse over here. Now that's from the 217 bridge, looking out that way again, and you see a lot of stuff missing. A lot of the tracks from the classification yard are gone. A lot of the buildings that had been there are not there anymore. That's looking south or southwest, showing the view from the 217 bridge again. This is our last shot. Shows McGee's Run coming down from the ridge and flowing out. Water was very important. Most people don't think about how important water was in the age of the steamers. Steamers consumed a heck of a lot of water. You wouldn't think about it. I remember one time I was looking at the statistics, how much a big steam engine would use coming up the Allegheny front. That's from like Altoona up to Gallitzin. And it would use maybe about a third of a tender full of water. Over here was the water supply place. These were tanks for the railroad. This was the train station over here. And I think that's enough now. We're going to say so long, and we'll see you again.